They said the Whitmore house had good bones, but everyone in the county knew bones could remember things. It stood at the edge of the woods like a patient thing that had learned how to wait, its white boards yellowed by summers that never forgot and winters that never forgave. People came in, but few stayed long, and fewer still spoke about what they heard after dusk, when the floorboards settled and the walls seemed to breathe. She was never meant to touch paper, let alone understand it, yet the first letters came to her the way hunger does. Quiet at first, then impossible to ignore. The Whitmore house shed words the way old trees shed bark. Torn envelopes fell behind desks, shipping notices slipped from coat pockets, and brittle ledgers were abandoned in corners where servants were expected not to look. She collected these fragments carefully, hiding them beneath loose boards in the shed, studying them at night by a stolen stub of candle. At first, the marks meant nothing, just scratches that repeated themselves in patterns, but repetition became familiarity, and familiarity slowly became sense. She learned by memorization, by sound, by comparing one page to another until meaning surfaced like a shape beneath dark water. Each new word felt like crossing a boundary she had been told did not exist. As her understanding deepened, she noticed that many of the papers were not written plainly. Names were abbreviated, transactions coded, phrases repeated that did not match their surface meaning. Numbers were altered by small strokes, dates rewritten over older ink, margins crowded with symbols that looked decorative until she recognized them as substitutions. The Whitmores, it seemed, had written two histories, at once one meant for the world, and another meant only for those who already knew how to read between lines. She pieced together the code slowly, matching false entries with real outcomes she had witnessed or heard whispered about after dark. A shipment that never arrived, a worker who vanished without burial, a child listed as inventory one year and erased the next. The most disturbing discovery came when she realized the ledgers contradicted the stories the family told about themselves. Public records spoke of generosity, of lawful ownership, of orderly decline after the war, yet the private books recorded punishments disguised as expenses and deaths concealed as transfers. The handwriting changed when these things were recorded, tightening, pressing harder into the page, as if the pen itself carried unease. She understood then that reading was not simply learning forbidden letters, it was uncovering intent. The words were proof that cruelty had been planned, repeated, and justified, not by passion but by routine. Each night she read further, and each night the knowledge grew heavier. She began to sense that the papers were not merely documents but anchors, binding the house to its past. The walls seemed closer when she whispered certain names, and the air thickened when she lingered on particular dates. What she had taught herself to read was not just language, but a buried confession, written carefully to survive long after voices had been silenced, waiting for someone unafraid or unaware enough to piece it together and realize that the Whitmore legacy was never built on land or wealth, but on secrets arranged neatly in ink, never meant to be spoken aloud again at first. She thought the changes in the house were tricks of her nerves, the sort of things fear invents when a person knows they are somewhere they should not be. The Whitmore house was old, and old houses spoke in groans and sighs, especially at night. But the timing was wrong. The sounds did not come at random. They came when she read, when her lips formed certain names, or when her finger traced specific lines of ink. The floorboards above her shifted, as though someone had taken a careful step, and the doors breathed inward, tightening in their frames. It was as if the house were responding, not to her presence, but to her understanding. The first undeniable sign came when, When a lamp went dark the moment she finished reading a passage about a punishment hidden behind a euphemism. The flame did not flicker or die slowly. It vanished, leaving the room colder than before. When she relit it and reread the same lines, the walls emitted a faint, shuddering sound, like a throat clearing after a long silence. She stopped reading then, heart racing, and the house settled, as though satisfied. From that night on, she tested it, reading harmless lists without consequence. Then returning to the darker entries and watching the house react with quiet agitation, she began to understand that knowledge disturbed whatever balance had been kept for years. The Whitmore house had been built to contain more than people. It contained memory. The deeper truths, once spoken aloud, rippled through its structure. Windows clouded without reason, drafts moved against the flow of air, and shadows gathered in corners that had no right to be dark. Once, when she read a name tied to a death that had never been acknowledged, a crack appeared in the plaster above her, thin as a vein, spreading slowly as she continued, stopping only when she fell silent. Fear warred with certainty. The house was not angry. It was uneasy. It reacted the way a body reacts to a wound being touched after years of neglect. Some nights, the sounds felt almost pleading, the beams settling heavily as though bearing a weight that had grown unbearable. Other nights, the responses were sharp and warning. A door slamming elsewhere in the house, a sudden cold that made her breath visible. She sensed that the house did not distinguish between past and present. To it, the words were not history, but events happening again, revived by being known. This realization changed the way she read. She learned to pause, to listen, to notice which truths caused the strongest reactions. The house had become a kind of ledger itself, recording guilt not in ink, but in movement and sound. Each reaction confirmed that what she had uncovered mattered, that the secrets were real and still alive within the walls. By learning to read, she had awakened something that had never intended to be disturbed. And now the house watched her as closely as she watched it, waiting for the moment when knowledge would tip into consequence. The missing child appeared first as an absence rather than a name, a space where the records should have continued but did not. She noticed it while comparing two ledgers kept years apart, one neat and public, the other narrow and hidden behind a false panel. In the earlier book, the child was listed carefully, age noted, value assessed, labor anticipated, as if the future could be measured and owned. In the later ledger, the name was gone, replaced by a vague adjustment in totals that balanced too perfectly to be coincidence. No illness recorded, no sale, no burial expense, just a quiet subtraction that pretended nothing had been taken. She searched for confirmation in the margins, in the symbols she had learned to recognize as disguises. A mark that usually indicated transfer appeared next to an unrelated entry weeks later. A date was overwritten so heavily it tore the page. When she traced the ink with her fingertip, she felt the pressure of whoever had written it, pressing down as though force could make the truth sink deeper into the paper. The child's existence had been folded into accounting language, reduced to loss and gain, hidden so cleanly that only someone looking twice would notice the shape left behind. The house reacted strongly when she read those lines aloud. A sound came from the upper floor, not a creak but a dull impact, as though something had fallen and been left where it landed. The air smelled faintly of damp earth, out of place in a room that had been dry for years. She understood then that the records were not merely evidence of wrongdoing, but a map pointing toward an act the house itself had never forgotten. The ledgers told her that the child had not left. The house told her the child had never been allowed to. As she followed the trail through dates and substitutions, a pattern emerged. Other discrepancies clustered around the same season, the same names, the same expenses reclassified again and again. The Whitmores' public story spoke of a difficult year, of labor shortages and unfortunate departures, but the private accounts revealed something far more deliberate. The child's disappearance coincided with an increase in security costs, repairs made to a specific wing of the house, and payments to men who were not otherwise listed as workers. Nothing named outright, everything implied. What unsettled her most was the precision. This was not chaos or sudden violence recorded in haste. It was preparation. The ledgers showed forethought, coordination, and afterward, careful erasure. The family had known exactly what they were doing, and more importantly, they had believed the written word would protect them. Ink had been used as a shield, a way to outlast witnesses and memory itself. By teaching herself to read, she had become the one thing the Whitmores had never accounted for. Someone who could see the gap, understand its meaning, and recognize that the child's story had been hidden in plain sight, waiting to be restored not through mercy, but through exposure. She sensed she was no longer alone long before she saw anyone. It began with the feeling of being observed in a way that had nothing to do with sight, a pressure in the air that sharpened whenever she unfolded the papers or whispered the coded names. The house, once reactive, grew tense, its responses quicker, less patient. Floorboards no longer waited for her to finish reading before they complained, and doors closed with a firmness that felt intentional. It was as though the secrets she carried had begun to leak outward, making themselves known to someone who understood exactly what they meant. The moment came quietly. She was reading in a narrow corridor near the back of the house, where the walls leaned closer together, and the dust lay thick and undisturbed. As she traced a line of figures that detailed payments made after the child's disappearance, a shadow fell across the page. She looked up expecting empty space, but instead saw a pair of polished shoes, still and deliberate. The person did not speak at first. Silence stretched, heavy with calculation, while the house seemed to hold its breath along with her. When the voice came, it was calm, almost curious, asking what she was doing in a tone that assumed an answer had already been chosen. She knew instantly this was not someone who would be confused by her presence or distracted by a lie. The eyes watching her were sharp with recognition, not of her role, but of the papers in her hands. They had seen ledgers like these before. They knew what certain marks meant. They understood the danger of what she had learned. Fear rose, but it was joined by something steadier. She realized then that the true threat was no longer discovery of her reading, but the knowledge she possessed. If she denied it, she might live longer, but the secrets would remain sealed, protected by the same silence that had erased the child. If she acknowledged what she knew, even without speaking it aloud, she would become a problem that could not be neatly balanced or rewritten. The house reacted violently to the tension between them. A door slammed somewhere above, hard enough to rattle the walls. Dust fell like ash, and the lamp nearest them flickered, casting warped shadows that stretched and broke across the corridor. The watcher flinched despite themselves, revealing just enough unease to confirm what she already suspected. They were not afraid of her. They were afraid of the truth she had uncovered and of the house that seemed to recognize it. In that moment, the choice became unavoidable. Silence had protected the Whitmores for years, but it had also trapped the dead and the forgotten within these walls. Speaking, reading, and being seen doing so had shifted something beyond control. Whether she lived or suffered for it no longer mattered as much as the fact that the secrets were awake now, and someone else knew she was capable of bringing them into the open. Explain key point no. 5 into 450 words without any subheadings, or the collapse did not arrive with fire or shouting, but with a series of small failures that spread through the Whitmore household like a sickness. It began when the ledgers were no longer where they were supposed to be, when documents thought sealed away surfaced in places they did not belong. A book left open on a desk to a page no one remembered turning. A loose sheet slipped beneath a door during the night. The house, once careful, became careless, as though it had decided concealment was no longer its role. Servants whispered, noticing that rooms long unused were suddenly impossible to keep locked. That drawers opened on their own, revealing papers that made no sense unless one knew how to read them properly. Word traveled beyond the house without a single accusation being spoken aloud. A clerk refused to sign off on an account that no longer balanced. A visiting official lingered too long over dates that had been altered. The Whitmores found themselves questioned not aggressively, but persistently, forced to explain inconsistencies that had once been invisible. Each explanation contradicted the last, and the weight of maintaining the lie grew heavier than the truth ever had. The family discovered too late that secrecy requires absolute silence, and silence was no longer possible. The house turned against them in subtler ways. Doors stuck when they tried to leave and opened when they did not want witnesses to enter. Private rooms echoed with sounds that drew attention rather than repelled it. The very walls that had once swallowed voices now carried them, allowing fragments of conversation to drift into corridors and down stairwells. At night, lights burned in empty rooms, illuminating shelves where ledgers sat plainly visible, as if displayed. The Whitmores began to avoid certain halls, sensing that the house had chosen a side and it was no longer theirs. The girl did nothing more than read. She did not accuse, threaten, or plead. She allowed the words to exist in the open air, where they could no longer be contained by ink or walls. Each name spoken weakened the careful structure the family had built around itself. Each date restored took something away from their authority. The legacy they had guarded so fiercely proved fragile once exposed to understanding rather than feeble. When the end came, it was quiet and irreversible. Reputation withered first, followed by influence, then protection. The Whitmores were left standing in a house that no longer recognized them as its keepers. It had served its purpose and released what it had been forced to hold. The secrets they believed would outlive them instead ensured their undoing, not through vengeance or violence, but through the simple, devastating act of being known